Welcome to Marketing Mistakes and How to Avoid Them. Here's your host, Stacy Jones.
Welcome to Marketing Mistakes and How to Avoid Them. I'm Stacy Jones, and I'm so happy to be here with you all today. And I want to give a very warm welcome to JJ Reynolds. JJ is the founder of Mediauthentic, where they provide detailed analytics and measurement to validate and fully optimize digital marketing campaigns. Focusing on client data across CRMs, Google Analytics, and cart platforms, JJ and his team turn real-time data dashboards into something your team is able to take knowledgeable action from and eliminates the guesswork. You may have a plan in place that's working to some level, but the goal here is that his team's going to help you truly know what is working, why it's working, and where you might be able to cut the fat. Today, JJ and I are going to be discussing the importance of data in your company, tools that will help you understand data better, and how it can improve your business overall. We'll learn what works from JJ's perspective, what should be avoided, and how some businesses just miss the mark. JJ, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. To start off, I always like having our listeners get to know our guests and where you came from. How'd you get here today that you're like, I love digital analytics? I mean, that's not what most people wake up in the morning thinking that they love, but you do.
Oh, yeah. It is not the norm by any means. So I started out actually in the world of Google Ads. So I hopped in straight out of university into Google Ads, working at an agency, learning all things about solar ads and direct response and all those different types of nuances and niches. We were spending, I think the average client was between $40,000 and $100,000 a month. So some pretty significant spends for the most like average businesses. The recurring question that we kept getting from clients, and again, when I talk with small businesses, middle-sized businesses, is it working? Right? That's usually the question that would occur where you'd say, hey, we signed on a new agency or we launched a new ad or anything along those lines. Is the question would come back, is it working? So I ended up going out on my own, actually dabbled in the world of Facebook ads as well, kind of a solo, like I can do this by myself situation. And ended up coming back to those same questions of, is it working? Is it working? Is it working? And ended up with taking a lot of different tutorials, understanding it, just kept trying to drill into the question of, is it working? Learning all the tools around websites and CRMs and ad platforms, et cetera, and ended up stopping running ads altogether and building out like an entire team that now all we do is answer that question of quote unquote, is it working? So now today, that's what we do. We serve businesses usually between 1 million at the low end and hundreds of millions is at the high end, and help them provide their teams with marketing data that they can take action on and answer the question of, is it working?
I love this as an agency owner. Like we spend our days building and building and building. And you have come up with the motherlode of an idea of removing stress to some degree because you're analyzing, and you're not building and doing, which to me right now sounds like heaven for a lot of marketers.
Yeah, no, it's a unique spot where it's a hard thing to sell, but if you have the right business where they don't know what's happening and you can say, and you implement everything, get your measurement sorted, your data collection, manipulations, visualizations, all of that sorted, it really can like change your entire marketing perspective. And again, it's a lot of stress of figuring out, making sure the numbers are right. And then hopefully people can take action on that, like again, faster than you could any other way.
And so when you're in this sales cycle and you're talking to, prospective clients, coming in, hey, my value proposition is I'm going to let you know if the ads you're running are actually being run well. That's pretty much your baseline. But then there's the fear factor, I'm assuming, that goes in there as well and says, and if they're not, you're wasting a lot of money. And I can help you actually see where you can optimize and see where things are broken and see what traffic and channels are actually coming to you when you do XYZ. That pretty much what you do, or where did I go wrong?
Yeah, usually there's two types of questions that people ask is what happened, right? Is like result oriented questions. And then how did that happen? People are really, really freaking good at what happened. You have a CPA if you're in the United States and an accountant. And if you really miss the mark, the IRS will tell you what you did. And so people are really good at that. But the how question of how did we achieve these results? And if the results stop, like a year ago now, like iOS happened and every Facebook ad agency on the planet Earth kind of freaked out. When the results stopped, you have to say what happened. And if you don't know, if you're just looking at your bank account statement every day, you're up the creek without a paddle. And so we try to avoid that so we can, for our clients, to make sure we know both the results, what's happening, and how it's happening, however you want to ask it. So that's like the full encompassing overall how we help people.
Okay. And so where are some of the issues that happen along the way? So you're like, hey, we can do all of this. Where do the wheels go off the bus?
The biggest wheel off the bus moment is asking wrong questions. And I'll give you a great example. So in short, the better the question you can ask, and if you're listening to this and you're a marketer of any sort, ask the best question you possibly can. Don't worry about how to get the answer. Try to ask the best question as possible. And then someone like myself and my team or your team has to figure out how to get the answer to that question. And if you did your job right, you had to ask a freaking bomb diggity question that has a bomb diggity action that can be taken upon the answer. And the wheels go off the bus when people ask questions about aren't actionable. So for example, my favorite question is like, if you sell widgets and you could ask the question of, do sales increase when the weather is bad? 9 times out of 10, like we can do it. Like we could just pull the APIs of the weather at that particular hour in the particular city of that your sale came in, how many users were in that city, how much was it precipitating and all that jazz. If I tell you, hey, Stacy, you sell 90% more when it rains. Mm-hmm. If you could figure out how to make it rain, that's a much better business model. Like that, I'll just go that way. So like, what are you going to do with that information? Almost nothing. And so the name of the game, again, keeping the wheels on the bus, is to ask the best possible questions that you can take an action on upon getting the answer of that.
Okay. And so you're getting the answers on how you can take your next action and move forward. Is there any specific areas that you see come up more often than not? Like, are there certain areas that you're like, oh, there's no surprises here?
Yeah, in general, like if you have a website, right, ask yourself why you have a website, right? And decide what the purpose is of your website in general. And then decide what the purpose is of each section of your website. And then decide what the purpose is of every single like page of that section. And that's like the biggest overall piece of like, a lot of people build stuff. Mm-hmm. For example, 4 years ago now, chatbots were all the craze, right? Chatbots, you could not go anywhere without hearing about ManyChat or Facebook chatbots. People built them, and then like, where are they now? A lot of people have abandoned them, and a lot of people still have them. And I think the big problem was, what was the purpose of having this thing? And if it's still serving its purpose, then awesome. If it's not, then why are we doing it? Why are you recording a podcast? Why are you writing that blog post? Why are you making a YouTube video? Why do you have a website? And then decide the purpose and then see, is it achieving that purpose? And that's like the simplified analytics mindset of like, what's the purpose? Is it achieving it? If not, let's improve it or stop doing that.
And that is something that is a learning lesson that no matter who you are and why you're tuning in, you could probably apply this across every little aspect of your life, from personal to work.
Exactly. Yeah. The feedback loop is basically what we're trying to build, right? You do an action, you see the results. Were the results what you wanted? Yes or no? And the shorter that we can have that feedback loop is where we come in, right? We can have reports that are real time. Is that helpful? Sometimes not. Sometimes it's weekly, right? Or weekly reporting. And the shorter you can do that, the better you're going to be for the most part. And then you can take actions as fast as your team can act. That's usually the limiting factor.
And then how often should you be doing this? So, you're running a digital campaign and you're doing metrics and analytics. And I'm sure you can come in after a campaign is totally finished and you get one set of results, or you can come in while a campaign's running and you can give real world live results so that action can actually be taken to potentially get you to the whole point of the purpose of what you are trying to achieve.
Yeah, I'd say the time is dependent on how many people you've asked. For example, if you ask, say you're running an ad campaign and you're spending $1,000 a month, all right, that's $30 a day, I think, if I do my math correctly. And so that $30 a day, if your cost per click is $10, if you look at a daily report, you've got 3 people. That's it. So what you want to do is you want to see the cadence of, I'd say, of tens. So for example, if you have 100 people to a web page, on average, let's just say 10 people fill out the form. That's 10% conversion rate. You'd want at least 10 of those cohorts to go through your thing. So 1,000 people then going through your site, great time to look. So if you're a larger company that you're spending a significant amount of money, you could look twice a day and optimize because you have enough volume to make sense of things. If you're like, for example, us, like Mediauthentic, I look weekly. Like weekly, we like check in. How are we doing? Are things working the way we expect them to? If not, let's either change the traffic source. We need to like have running our ads differently or running our SEO differently because we went after the wrong keywords and now we have people that don't know what we do, or we're doing well and let's keep going the way we're going.
Okay. And so what are some additional issues that pop up along the way?
The issues, would you like issues for a person marketing, an issue for like us, an issue for
maybe the marketer, like the brand marketer? Like what are the things that typically pop up?
Yeah, the biggest thing is like not knowing why a number exists. The biggest one is, what is a user on a website? What is it? How do you define a user? And
like a real person? Is that how some people define it? Or is there another way to define a user? Because there is.
yeah, so like that's exactly it, right? So a definition is on the internet is quite fluid. I can define a user one way and you can define a user another way. And so at a company, you need to have a conversation about how are we going to define all of these big buzzwords that everybody loves to use? Because if you have, for example, like bounce rate is something that everyone has heard of. Some people know of like an idea of what it is, but what is a bounce rate? Like we need to define that. If you're going to look at it, define it first, then look at it, because bounce rate can change. You can redefine what a bounce is.
So to me, a bounce rate is someone hops onto our website and it's like they check it out real fast and they're like, this was not answering my question that I want to look for, and they bail. So that's one. What would be another bounce rate?
Yeah, so the technical definition of a bounce rate in universal analytics, which is, we can talk about that, but universal analytics is if there is no second event. So for example, if you have a page view and all you're measuring for on your website is page views, imagine that, like here's, hey, all we're measuring for is page views. Someone comes to your website and there's no second page view. That's a bounce. That person could have spent 5 minutes on your website reading that article that you wrote about how to get in front of Hollywood, right? They could have spent 5 minutes reading this 2,000 word article that you like spent loving hours, but they didn't click on anything. They didn't click on anything. They didn't do anything. So the only event that Universal Analytics knows is a page view. They loaded the page, but they never clicked to load a second page. That is a bounce. They bounced. So like, if you're doing that, right, you've measured now like someone who's an engaged reader as a bounce because you didn't define what a bounce is. By default, that's what it is. And so if you're going to use that, like some people like want to hang their hat on bounce rate as a big, like, let's decrease bounce rate. What you want to do is define it first, because a lot of people don't know that that's even how it's measured. And that's the same thing for a lot of things, conversion rates. If you say conversion rate, some platforms will give you a conversion rate that is page views divided by transactions, which wouldn't you want users divided by transactions, right? The number of people that even had the opportunity to buy underneath the number of transactions, right? And so defining what a conversion rate is, or any metric that you want to use, is going to be the most important thing. And I've seen, I always make the joke of like, put on some boxing gloves whenever companies have this conversation, because one team wants to decide it one way, another team wants to say, hey, no, this is the definition of a qualified lead. How do we define it? One team is like, anyone who fills this form out, that's what the Facebook team wants. The sales team is like, no. Anyone who fills this form and shows up to the first sales call, that's a qualified lead.
And the
so now
owner
you have,
saying, and who has this much money to at least be able to afford our services.
Exactly.
How they show up, it's great that they're there, or they signed up, they showed up, but if they don't have the budget to actually pay, doesn't really matter.
Exactly. So like, that's what you need to define, like for what you want to, like what you're trying to change. We use bounce rate as a very technical example, but leads is a whole other example of saying, how do you want to define a lead? Because if someone fills out your form who has no dollars to their company name as a startup, and you're like, whoa, our minimum engagement is 10 grand. And they're like, well, we don't have any budget. We just want you to do it for free. And you're like, well, this lead has zero potential at the current moment to becoming a customer. And do we want to count that? Maybe in the future they will. Maybe 5 years down the road, they might. But again, defining those things is the marketer's dread, because I think most marketers like love to kind of rely on the surface of like bounce rate, page views, users, conversion rate. But once you get into it, you're like, whoa, how are we going to actually measure for this?
Which also is going to tell you the truth of what's going on inside your marketing to a much greater degree. And you might be able to hone in on all those things that you are paying for or spending time for, because time is money too, to get those people to be interested and to show up on the call. But if they didn't actually have the dollars in the first place, you might need to be fishing from a different pond that you're spending your dollars from.
Exactly. I'm going to squeeze, I think marketers in general we want to try and squeeze every dollar we spend, whether it's on marketing or personnel or paid media, for the most that we can. And improving every week, every month at a cadence that makes sense is the best way of doing that, as opposed to hoping on that one Hail Mary of the one Facebook campaign that will make you millions, because that usually doesn't work.
Come on, Hail Marys. We all love a good Hail Mary.
We always do. Like, you always got to send a couple out every year. But I wouldn't say, no, don't rely 100% on that until you're really confident.
Unless you're really into taking risks.
Yes.
Or it's a true Hail Mary.
Yes.
What else do people need to know before they're, diving in to run their marketing campaign?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing, like I keep saying the biggest thing because everything's big in my world of like everything's important in this realm because it's what we do. But define the journey of a customer, of what your person should do for that action. You can use any type of language you want, does not matter. But for example, define an impression, like being an impression with an offer. For example, if you're an e-commerce company, it might be viewing the item. Like they viewed the item. They now know we offer makeup brushes. Like they now know we sell those. But then what most companies will do is say people who viewed the item divided by transactions. Mm-hmm. And you're like, well, it's failing. But then you want to ask the next question of how many people stuck around for at least 10 seconds on the landing page? Mm-hmm. Because if they did stick around for 10 seconds, then we know that our above the fold is working, right? If 98% of people stick around for at least 10 seconds, like our above the fold copy, images, etc., are rocking. If they didn't add to cart, well, maybe now it's the next section down the page where we lost everybody because we started to describe for example, like how a makeup brush will make you millions. And everyone's like, that's hogwash. Like, I'm out. So your next section of copy might be where you need to adjust some things. Mm-hmm. And so as a marketer, you want to try to define that customer's mindset of going through a web page, of going through your actual landing page so that you can know if we're doing it right or wrong. Because looking at number of people who viewed item divided by transactions, you're like, kind of flying blind as what to fix, right? Was it above the fold copy? Was it the actual button? Was it the fact that your cart has 1,000 questions on checkout?
Like we don't know what step.
Yeah, was it the price? Like, was it the fact that you didn't list the price on the landing page, but you listed it in the cart and they're like, hold up, this makeup brush is $49, not $14.
Or you only could do PayPal. You couldn't use your American Express card, whatever it might be.
Exactly. So you want to measure that intention of what you expect people to do so that you know when, hey, nobody we got 1,000 people to add to cart and not a single person checked out. And you're like, maybe it's because we force everyone to use PayPal. We should add something else. Again, probably a bad example, but you get the idea of making sure you know the steps of a marketing journey through your website to the ultimate goal of what you're trying to accomplish.
All right. Well, I set you up on that whole PayPal thing. It makes sense because PayPal takes American Express, just in case anyone from PayPal is listening right now.
Yeah.
I know you take.
If you use PayPal, we still love you. We're not making fun of you. Don't worry.
What else do people on the brand team kind of deviate from or get confused by?
Yeah, I think one thing is measuring on-site and off-site metrics. And so when I say on-site, I'm talking about your website. Okay. If you don't have a website, you might want to listen to that podcast episode about websites. So website is on-site, and then off-site could be like YouTube views or Facebook impressions or direct mail sends, right? Anything that's kind of off your website. And so most people will kind of look at that and say, either we're going to count everything as equal opportunity. If they saw our Instagram post, they had the opportunity to buy. So that's going to be counted in our kind of marketing journey, marketing funnel, etc. Other people are like, we're only going to count if they hit our website. And that's where we're going to start. And the real answer is it's somewhere in between. So if you can have a good idea of what your off-platform strategy is, are you a YouTube company that's like posting a YouTube video every week? If you are, what's the intention of said YouTube video? Is the intention to be educational? Is the intention to sell? Is the intention to drive lead magnets? Like, why are you making YouTube videos if that's the case? So defining that off-site, meaning like YouTube or Facebook or whatever else, and on-site strategies can be really, really like advantageous to look at kind of separately as silos, and then look at it, put on your like combination lens and look at them together to see how they influence one another. Because sometimes you might have I have a friend that has a pool care company, and he wrote an article, I think it was like on like how to safely have sex in a pool. But nobody bought the actual thing he was selling because nobody actually owned a pool that was Googling that. So in that case, it was like, there's one example of, hey, we missed it on this mark, but then we got a ton of YouTube views, but no actual like people buying. So that's, again, a huge thing is looking at those on-site and off-site platforms, both independently and then in combination with each other.
Okay. And then what else should we know? Anything that's top of mind. That's like, this is need to know information.
Yeah, I'd say that the biggest need to know is, what are you trying to do?
Okay.
And if you can answer that question of what are you trying to do, and then break it down by every single step of what you're trying to do. And it sounds really basic, and it sounds like that's more of like a strategic marketing coach person who's like trying to charge you way too much for what they do. But the biggest thing is, if you're doing something, if you have any marketing action, if you're running Facebook ads, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to drive people to your website? Are you trying to get leads? And how detailed can you get? If the goal of an ad on Facebook is to get people to view the landing page, that's the goal. Let's measure how efficiently this is at getting people to the landing page. And then on the landing page, what are we trying to do? Get people to push the add to cart button, right? Or get people to fill out a form to apply to your work with you. And so if you can define that, what you're trying to do on every single piece of effort you have, it makes life a world easier, because you now have an idea of when something stops working, what was it? Because what you're trying to do failed with what actually happened.
Well, how can our listeners find you, JJ? Like, where do they go?
Yeah, so got two options here. If you're looking to have full services kind of done for you, hop on a call with myself and my team, head over to Mediauthentic. So that's MEDIAUTHENTIC.com. There'll be a link in down below, or wherever you can find links, or just Google JJ Reynolds. Also, if you want some training on like how to do visualizations, how to kind of do a lot of the more advanced kind of features, we have another site that's datastudio.vip, where you can go and learn. Like, we got tons of free stuff on like, hey, it's just all written by me, and hopefully it's a little bit more fun than the average analytics person who is a little bit dry, in my personal opinion. So
you are not dry, you are fun. So I'm sure it's a lot of fun.
So yeah, those two things, or just Google JJ Reynolds and scroll down until you find somebody who's in marketing and not a baseball star, because there's a JJ Reynolds baseball.
Hey, there's a Stacy Jones, a drummer.
Hey,
too. Like,
we could start a band.
I've battled him on internet for years now. And I just, some things I can compete. Sometimes if it's in the music space, that gets hard.
Yeah, just be like JJ Reynolds, not the baseball player. Stacy Jones, not the drummer. There
Right.
you go.
That's it. Well, JJ, what are any last parting words of advice that you could share with us?
Know your numbers, know what you're trying to do, and measure against yourself. Don't look at other people's benchmarks because everybody's inflating their own numbers because they're trying to sound real sexy. The best conversion rate you can have is better than it was yesterday, and you can always improve as long as you're trying and looking at it.
And your bottom line is figure out the purpose and the why and what you're trying to do, which is what you keep saying over and over and over again. And again, applies to everything in life. So I certainly found that valuable. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
So to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Marketing Mistakes and How to Avoid Them. If you have any questions in regards to how you can leverage influencers or product placements or celebrities, movies and TV shows and make your brand that's a shiny star, let's say that instead, give me a call, reach out, and I'm happy to connect you with our team and chat more. Have a great one.